One. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Pursuit Podcast, Making Orlando a Better Place. We have a special guest today, Renee Matthews, and we're also joined with my colleague, Dr. Trey Martin today. And we're going to be talking about gluten sensitivity. And I want to start off with a powerful story. This is pretty interesting. I think a lot of people can relate to this. And this is Renee's story too. It's on her website. Several years ago, I was training to run a half marathon with my husband. I enjoyed running, and I was so tired all the time. I think a lot of people experience those same symptoms. All I wanted to do was just take a nap. Finally, after years of being anemic, I was shocked to receive the diagnosis of celiac disease. I knew what celiac disease was, and I had even counseled people on gluten-free diets, but the personal necessity to live gluten-free put a whole new spin on the world of nutrition and a rude awakening. I had a lot to learn, but once I began following a gluten-free diet, my anemia, fatigue, and overall health greatly improved. Looking back, I had 5 years of symptoms of celiac disease that no one in my life had connected as one health problem. In the beginning, even with a master's degree in nutrition and the background of being a registered dietitian for over 20 years, the gluten-free diet and lifestyle was overwhelming for me. Because I'm sure that a lot of people are dealing with this too, is all of a sudden they get diagnosed with this, now what?
Mm-hmm.
So I searched for information about how to follow a gluten-free diet, read food labels that are not so overwhelming, gluten ingredients. I took grocery store tours at Whole Foods, found out which restaurants have gluten-free menus, worked hard to understand to help prevent cross-contamination. I remember my disbelief the day I read about needing another toaster due to the cross-contamination. So much going on there. And now she's learning about basic good nutrition, teaches you a lot about the foods that are good for you. Learning about a gluten-free diet is just another window into what foods are good for you and which foods your body can physically not handle due to gluten. At this point, I truly thank God for my discovery of my celiac disease. My health was poor for way too long before I was able to finally get diagnosed. With my background in food and nutrition, I am now blessed to be in the position not only to help others understand their illness, but to help them thrive again through learning to live life gluten-free. Everyone, welcome Renee Matthews, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Wow.
Perfect. I mean, it's a great story because there's you work with people just like us who we see who have these constant complaints and symptoms that don't respond to standard care, and no one knows what to really do with them. So that's why we thought it was awesome to have you on the podcast, and we can go over the concept of gluten sensitivity. And thank you very much for taking time out of your day today to come and join us.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me. Yes, I actually had a referral from a GI doctor who, when I got the records, he actually put in the notes, I don't know what else to do. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, let's start with diet.
Yeah. First off, let's start with the diet.
Yeah.
So, hey, Trey, do you have anything to add in real quick before we get started?
Anything to add in? No. Thanks for having me on again. I look forward to this discussion. I've always been curious too, learning the difference between like gluten sensitivity versus celiac disease, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But that's kind of the thing I want to parse down too, is like what is really the main difference, and are there a lot of people that are sensitive but don't have celiac disease, and in that kind of train of thought. So hopefully we'll touch on all those things.
Right.
Yeah, that's my first question for you. What is the difference between celiac disease, gluten sensitivity, and gluten intolerance? Because there's 3 different major labels, and it's probably some sort of spectrum. But
yes,
if you could explain to our followers, what is the difference between those?
Yeah, good word. I was actually just going to say that it is a huge spectrum. So you can have gluten intolerance over here, like maybe it gives you constipation, and then you have celiac over here, which is autoimmune, which means your body is attacking itself because it sees the gluten as a pathogen. So, but in between, there's this whole range of other things that are going on. So people can be gluten sensitive because of probably leaky gut issues. And that can be a whole nother topic. But there's also one other thing that I'd like to mention, and that's wheat allergy. So there are people that are actually allergic to wheat, just like maybe a peanut allergy, but allergies are a little bit different in sensitivities or intolerances or even celiac disease, which is autoimmune, because a wheat allergy is more anaphylactic. So immediately, like you get that anaphylactic, you can't breathe kind of thing. And in fact, when I was looking through some of the information, actually the wheat allergies is actually, they have one called wheat-dependent exercise-induced anaphylaxis.
Wow.
So if you hear of people that, which actually I have seen some YouTube kind of information on people that were running and marathons, and I'm sure you guys have heard some of this, where they just, for no reason that they know of, start having these anaphylactic situations where they just can't breathe. So, and that it's actually wheat induced. So actually the first time I heard that, I was like, I wonder if they have celiac. And I didn't even know about the wheat allergy issue yet, but I just know that, the celiac has like 300 different symptoms, which makes it one of those diseases, kind of like IBS, which, is just so widely, has so many symptoms that people or doctors don't know to look deeper. And so it kind of gets missed over as a diagnosis. It takes a lot of people, I was lucky, I was lucky that the first GI doctor I went to, and it was actually to get a colonoscopy, because we had turned 50 and we went to get colonoscopies, like you're supposed to do screening. But I'd been anemic for a long, long time. And he looked at me and said, "Do you have celiac disease?" And I was like, "I don't have that," because I didn't have any of the GI symptoms. So here's the problem. It can be GI, it can be skin, it can be neurological, it can be so many things that doctors just don't know how to funnel down and say, "Oh, it might be this, and let's test for it." Well, once you test, you can kind of know one way or the other. So,
do you mind touching on leaky gut a little bit? I know that's kind of a common colloquialism going on right now, but like, what's the baseline physiology? I guess kind of the 30-second elevator spiel on what leaky gut is.
Okay, so leaky gut is caused by many different things. Actually, it can be caused by even stress, even emotional stress, because your gut is your second brain, and honestly, it's probably your first brain. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Hopefully you can edit some of this.
Yeah.
Sounds like I got something in my throat.
It's all good. I think it's really good too, because you mentioned on the fact that you were anemic and you've been diagnosed with these other things that, like, my wife was even diagnosed with anemia, and all they told her was to just supplement with more iron.
I know.
But yet for years she was still anemic, but they still just wanted to supplement with more iron. I was like, at some point you have to realize that the anemia is just the effect of something. It's not the root cause. She doesn't have anemia. And then when she started solving the root cause, like working on her gut health, looking at gluten sensitivities, dairy sensitivities, getting rid of some of those things, restoring that, and supplementing with nutrients that she was deficient in, is when she became not anemic anymore. I think vitamin C also helps with the uptake of the absorption of iron. But anyway,
Absolutely.
it's really interesting to see that stuff, that anemia is not the problem, it's the effect. And
Anemia is the symptom.
Yes, correct.
Yes. And the same thing, like my doctors had said, in fact, when I was going to run that marathon, I did go to my primary care and go, "Look, I know I'm anemic," because it's funny, I worked for the VA for years and years, and they would give you a half day off if you would donate blood. And I could never donate blood because my H&H was never high enough, because I just always knew it was low. But nobody ever pursued like going to your, regular doctors and getting your checkups, wellness visits, whatever. What is a wellness visit if they don't go further and go, "Oh, there's something wrong," So they would just say, "Just take some iron." Yeah.
Yeah, but if you can just briefly go over that leaky gut, because a lot of people don't know what leaky gut is, real quick.
Okay, let me just back up just for a minute, because celiac disease is really only 1% of the population. But out of that 1%, like 80% of the people don't know they have it because it's so underdiagnosed. And anemia for adults that get diagnosed, anemia is like one of the major symptoms. So it's like 10, 15%. So it just goes along with your story about your wife. Okay, so Leaky gut is intestinal permeability, which means your gut is allowing things to get through. There's only one cell layer that allows things on the inside and things on the outside. So that one cell, you kind of think of it, oh, it's going through the cell and getting into your body. Well, there's also these junctions, which with the cells are stuck together. So if these junctions are too far open, it's going to allow too large of a particle to get through it. And that's where leaky gut, as the common term, comes in. So zonulin is a protein that opens up those intercellular junctions like this. And when zonulin is in too much in the gut, then the junctions are too high. Zonulin can be increased because of wheat exposure, or, actually, as I started to say, it can even be something like an emotional stress, a physical stress, of course, if you get injured. It can be an emotional stress because you do have a second brain there in your gut. You have as many neurons in your gut than a cat's brain. So that really is your second brain, and probably your first brain, honestly. But it will allow too large particles to get into your bloodstream. And then once in your bloodstream, then your body's like, oh my gosh, what is this? Because it might not be a pathogen. Maybe it's just too large of a protein particle from food, but then your body doesn't know what to do with it because it's just too large. It hasn't been digested enough to go through. Yeah. Does that make sense, Trey?
Yeah. So
Following?
just curious too, with you talked about zonulin for a minute, and is that a property of wheat, or what is it about wheat? No. What's the connection there between wheat opening up things?
It's a response. Actually, it's not a part of wheat. It's part of your body. So you produce zonulin within your body. So you do want to have these junctions that open and close and open and close. It's when there's too much zonulin. So too much zonulin can be a response to wheat, but it can also be a response to other pharmaceutical drugs. It can be a response to foodborne bacteria. So people that get food poisoning, that can also cause it as well. So all these things can cause some type of pesticides. You've heard of the whole glyphosate issue. That can cause it as well. So a lot of times if we move back to talking about gluten sensitivity, it might not even be the gluten. Okay, what is gluten? Gluten is the protein that's in wheat, barley, and rye. And then any variation of those three, wheat, barley, and rye, that has gluten. But so some people, I'm kind of thinking some people aren't even sensitive to the gluten. It's what's on the wheat or the wheat product. So that's why people that think they're gluten insensitive, they take the gluten out of their diet or foods, anything that has flour, wheat, barley, rye, and then they feel better. But was it the gluten, or was it all those chemicals that those foods are processed with, like glyphosate, which is a pesticide that is now sprayed on tons of stuff, not just wheat, but
Roundup, right? Isn't that what?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some common foods that have gluten in it?
Okay, so your foods that have gluten, which is the protein, which is only wheat, barley, and rye. So anything, of course, made with wheat, any flour type of item. Barley is used to make malt. So malt is used as a flavoring.
Beer for people? No beer for people who are gluten sensitive?
No beer from barley.
Yeah.
They do have, and I was diagnosed maybe 2014, and I'm not a big beer drinker, but my husband is. So there were like two different brands, but now it's almost like a subculture to have all these gluten-free alcoholic beverages now. So, but yes, regular beer is made with barley and rye and probably even some wheat, different wheat. Yeah, like stouts are made with wheat. Yeah. So that's in beer. Here's another one that like freaked me out the first time I knew: soy sauce. Why would soy sauce? And it's funny because when you are at restaurants and you're telling people I can't have any gluten in those, and it might be some kind of marinade on a meat or something like that, they'll say, oh, we don't have any soy. And it's not the soy, but it's the soy sauce because it's brewed with wheat. Crazy.
Okay.
So here's another one that you might know. I put down a couple of things that were like astonishing to Stephanie and I, which I didn't mention. So the year I got diagnosed out of the blue, I knew my daughter had it, and she was 16 at the time, and but she'd been complaining of a stomach ache for years. And again, here she is going to a pediatrician having typical symptoms of celiac disease. Nobody caught it, but I knew the day I got diagnosed. So she had it, so we both went gluten-free, and it like revolutionized our lives for sure. Okay, so another one that she just didn't like, anything that's a candy or a gum that's like a gummy substance. Because
really, they have gluten in them? I do notice they say like fat-free, gluten-free on like gummies and stuff like that, but like I never thought gluten would be in candy. Or like
okay,
a gummy
so
candy.
let's talk about what gluten is. Gluten is the elastic property in the wheat. It's a protein. That's the word glue comes from. So it's very sticky. It's elastic. If you think about pizza crust, that's what makes it nice and sticky and able to expand. So they take that product out and they use it in tons of other products. It's called hydrolyzed protein. So they use it in anything gummy, like gummy worms or gummy bears or whatever. Twizzlers, gum. So that also gets used. The hydrolyzed protein, unfortunately, gets used in a ton of stuff. So honestly, here's the thing. Being gluten-free is not that difficult because there's tons of other food that you can eat besides wheat, barley, and rye. But it is because of how far our food system has come, and people don't eat whole foods. They eat these products that have tons of other ingredients, substances. Okay, so they use hydrolyzed protein in lots of other stuff, such as cold cuts. Who would think that wheat would be in a cold cuts, right? Imitation seafood and another veggie burgers. So you're thinking a veggie burger, but if you think about it, veggie, okay, so it's actually used for the protein for the veggie burger. So that's just a few things. Oh, and I did want to mention like things that are flavored, like chips, like barbecue chips and stuff, because even Rice Krispies, you would think Rice Krispies, it's rice. It shouldn't have gluten, but it has malt to make it more flavorful. So that's what you have to look at.
Rice itself doesn't have gluten in it.
Correct.
Okay.
But you just have to look at the, you have to look at the labels. You have to kind of learn some education about reading labels and what things actually have gluten and what don't.
So if someone thinks they may be gluten sensitive, I know there's millions and millions of symptoms, but what are some of the most common symptoms that someone may be aware of if they may be sensitive to gluten?
So if you're sensitive to gluten, okay, so it is funny because it's so individual. So some people can have really constipation issues. Some people can have diarrhea issues. So it just depends. And, so I'm kind of one that says, okay, you have this, this, and this. If everything else has been ruled out, let's go, maybe it's the gluten, Now here's the thing. If you do take gluten out of your diet, you can't get an accurate test for celiac disease because celiac disease is an autoimmune response to that gluten. So if I eat gluten, I'm going to make this response and an antigen, which is then tested in my bloodstream. So what I like to do is have people get tested for celiac first. And then if that's clear, they're, again, it's only 1% of the population, but you don't want to miss that 1%. So if they are clear, then you go on an elimination diet. You take it out of your diet for 2 weeks and see how you do. Then you add it back in, and then you'll know, oh, this gluten caused me to have a headache. It can cause me to have fatigue. It can cause me to have joint aches. Anybody that has an autoimmune disease can be sensitive to gluten issues.
Do you think it's something like if you don't have gluten issues and you never really notice any effect from it, is it something, should you just cut it out anyway? Like, is there much benefit to wheat-based products that supersede the potential sensitivity issues that could come from it?
Well, no, you don't want it. It's super hard for one thing to, as I said, if it was just the gluten, then that's not a problem. But it's all this additive back into foods. So what I like to promote is whole food eating, which is foods that come from the ground or come from a mother that more simple, less ingredients in them so you know what they are. But if you don't have a gluten sensitivity, there's no reason to take the wheat out. And it does have some good properties. You do have some, vitamin E that comes from it. You do have some bran and fiber that comes from it. So some high fiber foods that come from it. So you don't want to have to take it out if you don't want to, if you don't need to. But if you do take it out and you see that it caused a problem, you can, easily learn how to adapt.
What's your stance on Whole30 as a diet plan?
Whole30, I think, helps people realize how much junk they're eating.
I did it about 4 months ago, so I was just curious. And I read the book too, and it talked a lot about just testing things and going back to base camp and seeing like, okay, do I have food sensitivities? If I remove all the stuff that we know commonly causes issues.
And eat more whole foods, right?
Yeah. It works great for me. For my girlfriend, not so much. She actually heightened an almond allergy she didn't know she had because we're eating so much nuts.
Too many almonds, right?
Yeah. But it was really fascinating to kind of pare it down and just cut out all the fillers and binders and all the different stuff we put in food now and kind of see what you're left with.
Absolutely. And a lot of people are sensitive to those fillers and so the reason I'm saying, if you don't have to go gluten-free, don't, is because a lot of the gluten-free food, it's not just, you can't just switch from regular crackers to gluten-free crackers because you're just like trading one processed food for another.
Yeah, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul is what they say, right? Yeah.
Interesting. So when someone who is gluten sensitive and they eat gluten and they start feeling some of these symptoms, is that because they're allergic to it? Is it because it started the inflammation process?
Yes.
Like what causes some of these symptoms after they consume gluten?
Yeah, so I don't think it's not an allergy, but it's more of a sensitivity or the inflammation because the body's trying to respond. Like, what is this gluten that's bothering me? So you don't go all the way to the spectrum to the celiac disease, but your body is kind of thinking, what is this and what's going on?
Okay, perfect. So that's,
causing inflammation. So that inflammation can come across in people that have arthritis. So it can come off in joint pain. It can come off in eczema. So people that have autoimmune with psoriasis. So anybody that's autoimmune would and could benefit from a gluten-free diet. And so there is that aspect of it as well. Did you know dairy as well? Dairy and gluten are very inflammatory. In fact, they're also related to more of an opioid peptide within your brain and can actually, that's why when people said they're addicted to cheese, well, they really are, because it does have this opioid peptide addiction in your brain. And as far as mental health goes, there have been people that have gotten off gluten that have like completely reversed their mental health problems.
Do you think that's because of the serotonin produced in the gut? Is that kind of a leveling effect or?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the reason, but it has to do with the specific peptide.
Okay.
And I think more the molecular properties. Just like how casein and gluten affect the thyroid.
Yeah. I've stopped drinking dairy probably after I read the book, The China Study, who was written by a guy who's a vegetarian, but used to be a dairy farmer, I believe. I think he's a PhD. I forget, some Campbell. So I stopped doing dairy then, but I don't feel that I'm too gluten sensitive. I don't feel bad after I eat it, but I know that my wife is. She's definitely gluten sensitive and stuff. So my next question would be, what do you think started all this? Because 10 or 15 years ago, we weren't hearing about gluten sensitivity and no one had gluten-free menus. Do you feel that this is just something that was going on for a long period of time, but we never knew? Or do you feel like, is it a genetic problem? If someone has a gene that happens to get activated due to gluten, that it causes this? Or do you feel it's genetic adaptation that as we consume these foods that have been exposed to processing and pesticides and stuff, that we developed these gluten sensitivities over the last couple of decades? What are your thoughts to what started all this and why is it coming out in the past decade?
Yeah, I do think it has a lot to do with the glyphosate. It's funny, I was asked this exact question when I first got diagnosed, and all I had learned about was the celiac disease and how the celiac disease has three prongs to the stool, right? You have to have a genetic component. It's the only autoimmune disease where they know the genetic component and the trigger. So you have this genetic component, you have the trigger, the gluten, and you have some event that would cause it to erupt and become active.
This
Because
is
I had,
this is in celiac disease.
yes.
Okay.
So because I had the same genetics my whole life, but I didn't have the manifestation of the celiac until later. So that can happen because of, again, some kind of injury, physical or mental, or some kind of stress that happens for women. It can happen because of pregnancy or menopause. So, or stress because of, divorce or a death or some kind of mental stress, or foodborne or illness, which if you have some kind of pathogen that has, really tore up your GI system, had those um, junctions opened up, and now the gluten got through to your bloodstream, and now your body responds to it. So that's gluten. And I'm sorry, now I lost track. What the real question was, why did all this happen? Okay,
Yeah, what's your thoughts
so
on
that's celiac disease. But yeah, if we go back, that's only 1% of the population. It's up to about 10% of people that are finding that they're sensitive to gluten. 10%. Now, how could that have happened in the last 10 years? Well, a lot has changed with our food system in the last 30 years since I was out of college. And since I became a dietitian, oh my gosh, everything has changed. So yes, the chemicals that they use on our food, and specifically the glyphosate that they, started using on GMO foods, but now they use on everything. So I think, and when that first came out, they said it didn't bother humans and it wouldn't affect humans. However, that's before they knew about the microbiome. They didn't know about all the microbes that live in your gut that do tons of great stuff, including making the serotonin and the vitamin K. So they didn't know about those things. Well, that glyphosate is basically just like it's a pesticide on the plant, it's a pesticide in your gut as well. So, and that's on all our food, and it's poison.
I think
I don't know if this is true or not for other countries, but I know there's a lot of things we allow in America, like red dye 40, I think is a thing, glyphosate's a thing. We're kind of unregulated. We let agriculture do whatever they want to make money. In Europe, do we see different rates of celiac disease because maybe they have tighter regulations where they're not allowing all of the stuff in the food supply? And I don't know how much stricter they are. I don't know about Europe, but I know we're a little bit more lenient than the rest of the world on some of the chemicals we use.
Right. Okay. So I think in Europe, it is still around 1% of the population as far as celiac disease goes. There are populations like in the Netherlands, Ireland. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's another one, which is actually a higher percentage because of genetics.
Okay.
So Italy actually is pretty high as well. So, but as far as the other things, you're right. Europe does not allow glyphosate. So I have had plenty of people and seen reports of plenty of people that are gluten sensitive in America and go to Europe and eat any bread they want. So that goes back to my other statement. Is it the gluten, the protein gluten, or is it all the other stuff that's on this wheat product that now is in all these wheat foods? Yeah.
It's very interesting on that too. It's like the concept of food sensitivities and what's starting it. And I remember, like, I'm a big proponent of diet needs to be customized for each individual, primarily off of blood work. It's not just everyone does one diet that works for everyone. That's just the way that I kind of think of things. So I was getting my blood work done, and I was looking at nutrient deficiencies. I want to see what I needed to supplement with or eat more foods of stuff. And I started to realize that I started getting sensitive to foods that I eat a lot of. Not just for the testing, but I was developing a sensitivity, not an allergy, not a allergic reaction, or not being like totally like celiac disease or anything, but I was getting sensitive to chicken, spinach, eggs,
'Cause you ate 'em
tomatoes
all the
because
time.
I eat a lot of them. So
Mhm.
it just makes you curious. Is like, how am I getting sensitive to healthy foods? It's like,
Well,
is there something on the food that I'm consuming a lot of, developing the sensitivity possibly?
or are you having some leaky gut issues that are allowing the antigens from those foods because you eat those foods all the time, and you're having
Yeah,
some leaky gut issues because of the glyphosate and stuff that is in your diet as well. So the
yeah,
glyphosate, I think promotes the leaky gut. And then once you
yeah,
have the leaky gut, no matter what you're eating, even though we consider it healthy, broccoli and spinach, you might have a sensitivity to it.
yeah.
Now, the thing about food sensitivities is you can have a delayed reaction up to 72 hours later, and it can be dose dependent. So you might be able to eat spinach today and then spinach at the end of the week and have no problem. But if you eat it 3 days in a row, then it
Yeah.
might cause you to have this symptom, whatever it may be.
Yeah. I think that we can go talk about
Yeah.
leaky gut and gut health on a
Oh,
whole
yeah. It's a
another
whole nother
topic,
thing.
but I want to stay on board with the gluten sensitivity. So is there a test that people can take if they feel they're gluten sensitive, or is it a diagnosis from exclusion where you just take out gluten and see if your symptoms go away? Is there like a test to kind of
Good
diagnose
question.
this?
Good question. I'm glad we got to this. So for celiac disease, there are specific antigen tests that is a blood test that you get a blood test serology test done, and it's specific antigens, and it's very accurate. Um, as far as food sensitivities, there's not as good testing for it. In fact, some people are still saying it's unreliable, but there are some tests out there that can show if you're having some issues with sensitivities.
Yeah.
There's actually stool tests that can show if you're having like an immune response to the sensitivities,
Mhm.
because it'll come up with like an anti-gliadin, which gliadin is part of gluten. It'll evaluate for anti-gliadin in the stool. So there's a stool
Interesting.
test that can do that as well. And
I
if that
think,
comes back,
yeah.
then you can just know by how much is in your stool. You can know, am I on the verge of having an autoimmune problem?
I think you mentioned it earlier. Can you go over the concept of like the Whole30 diet, but with gluten, of for some of our followers, like how you removed it for 2 weeks and then you
Oh, sure.
reintroduce it and you track your symptoms. And then when you reintroduce it, you manage and see if your symptoms come back at all. Can you go over that as a good
Sure.
strategy to see if they
Sure.
are
So
gluten sensitive or not?
yeah, so sure. So I like the Whole30 because again, I think it helps people realize how much crap they're eating because they just don't realize, because people in general, including myself, I used to think ate a healthy diet, but yeah, I've really gotten more and more to the other end of the spectrum to
Yeah,
eating more whole foods. And that means, baking and roasting your vegetables and making an emphasis to have whole foods rather than packaged foods. And so the difference between doing Whole30 and an elimination diet for gluten is that you would take all the gluten out, and it really needs to be done through a practitioner because, well, you can do it on your own and see if like how you feel. But again, I do want to caution people, if you take it out for a week or so and you kind of feel better, do get an appointment with a practitioner. There's several dietitians now in town. There's a couple new people, and so there's several dietitians in town that specialize in gluten-free diet or celiac or whatever, and they can walk you through getting tested for celiac disease, because you do want to get that definitive diagnosis, because you want to know how strict you need to be. Because
mhm.
if you're just gluten sensitive and it kind of causes you a little diarrhea, kind of like people do with lactose intolerance. They know if they eat that ice cream, it's going to cause them some bloating. But every once in a while, they might go, oh, I'm at a birthday party. They have, a little bit. But if you do have celiac disease, it's causing you more physiological damage within your body. So you do want to know that so that you know to be super strict. You also want to know it because it's hereditary. So it's one in
Oh,
like
that's interesting. Okay.
it's 1 in about 133 people. However, if you have a direct relative, like what they call that, primary relative, secondary relative,
Yeah.
it's more like 1 in 22.
Yeah. My
So you want to
wife's
know.
mom is also, gluten sensitive, possibly celiac disease. So that is interesting.
So you want to
And
know because, yeah, your children or so forth, and you want
yeah,
to.
it's kind of crazy too, because a lot of people think they eat healthy. I remember in high school, I thought I was eating healthy because I ate from the salad bar, but I was putting a lot of processed ham cubes and ranch dressing and some other stuff on my salads. I was thinking I was eating a salad on the healthy,
Yeah.
a bunch of garbage on there and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So,
So I think, so back to your question about the Whole30, I think the Whole30, doing that once in a while can really just help bring you back to real food. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah. And doing an elimination diet. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say with Whole30, one thing that was wild to me is a lot of people ask me like, well, aren't you going to miss all the junk foods? And it doesn't taste good. And by like day 4, it's like your taste buds almost reset. Carrots taste like they're just dipped in sugar. By the end of it, I mean, dates were like eating donuts. I would have those as like kind of a dessert based thing. So it's just fascinating when you remove all of the junk, like what real foods taste like.
True.
And like even little stuff like the cotton candy grapes at the grocery store.
Oh, too sweet.
Yeah, by day 25, you're like, no, that's too sweet. I'd rather go have some broccoli now. So it's crazy just how we get used to those chemical flavors and processed flavors. And you pare it back down to the basics, and you're like, man, bananas are pretty good actually. Sweet potatoes, this should be illegal at this point. Like this is too sweet. So for anyone that is considering doing that kind of thing, do it with someone managed. I do think it is important too to underscore like getting professional help with dietary recommendations. Like I know it's easy for us to like all shoot from the hip and be like, oh, I can
just
eliminate
food. Everybody
yeah,
eats it.
Food. And for us, it's always, oh, it's just exercise, or I'll rehab myself.
Yes.
And then you come in 8 months later, really banged up because you've been trying to do something on your own. So I think it's important to get professional help. So I'm not saying like, I'm not endorsing Whole30. It's a wild experiment I ran on myself because whatever, I'm young, I can bounce back. But I think it is important to have someone like you to walk people through those kind of things too, just so they can make use of the data that they're seeing too.
Right. Good point.
Yeah. So treatment for it, is the primary treatment just to remove gluten, or do you also promote more of a holistic thing, like looking at the total body, restore gut health, also removal of gluten? What are treatment options?
Well, since I was diagnosed with celiac disease, I found integrative and functional medicine and integrative functional nutrition, and it really brought me back to my love of nutrition and getting to the root of issues. And so, yes, the main treatment for celiac is a strict gluten-free diet. Like, not that I haven't gotten gluten in the last 4 years, but never on purpose. Because now it's funny because before, like I wasn't sensitive. It didn't cause me any GI problems. I didn't have any problems. I had lost weight, but because that was glorified in our society, that was no big deal. But now if I can tell immediately, like I get fatigue, I feel like I have the flu. So you actually get more sensitive to it when you take it out.
Oh, good. That's interesting.
Yeah. Now I forgot your question.
Oh, it was just more treatment options and then taking a
but
holistic approach.
Yes, I do want to point out. Okay, so the treatment for celiac disease is remove the gluten, be very strict about removing gluten. But because it has this autoimmune component to where the gluten has caused the villi in your gut, which is these little, so your gut lining is not like a sheet of silk. It's like a terry cloth towel. It has all these little projectiles like this, and each little projectile absorbs the nutrients. Well, what happens when gluten is it causes those villi to be stunted like this. So if you have all this surface area to absorb nutrients, and now you have this surface area to absorb nutrients, you're not absorbing very many nutrients. So a lot of people, especially when you're first diagnosed, really need supplementation and getting a good, I know you mentioned getting a blood test to see what nutrient deficiencies you had. Getting a good blood test a micronutrient blood test. Now, this isn't the typical CBC that, your doctor
Yeah.
runs, and people don't know the difference. That's where practitioners have to intervene. But just starting off, a good B vitamin, an iron supplement probably. So there are some things that, need to be added back in because you've probably been malnourished from not absorbing those things for quite a while.
Yeah. And
So
a lot of times your standard practitioner or primary care provider may be so
never.
behind on this stuff, running
Yeah.
tests that are from the 80s still going on. So you may have to go to an expert, dietitian, similar to like Renee. You may have to go to a functional medicine physician and like stuff like that. Somebody who thinks like kind of proactively and total body and stuff like that. So
the tests are out there. They are. But yeah, like you're saying, it takes 17 years to get from research information down to the doctor's office.
Yeah, it takes
17 years.
Yeah,
so in between that time, there's a lot of great stuff that we could go be doing, which is kind of what's nice about the day and age that we live in with all the internet and the biohackers. I mean, actually, information is getting out there sooner now, but only if you're out looking for it. So
yeah, true. So if someone thinks they have gluten sensitivity and they want to consult you, how can they find you? What's your website and social media links? We're going to put them in the link below in the description, but how can someone find you if they're looking for you?
All right. So my business is Renee Nutrition, and you can reneenutrition.com. That's out there. And it has a lot of articles. It explains more of this. I know there's a lot to go over. I'm also on Instagram as Gluten-Free Expert, and that's an easy one to follow. And I'm on Facebook for Renee Nutrition as well.
Good, perfect. And we'll put the links below to her website and social media handles and stuff like that. But we're not going to let you off that easy real quick. You have to do the Fab 5 questions. Are you ready?
What's that?
You're ready. Okay, here we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we have a couple questions that we finish everyone off with, and then we'll let you go. So one is, what book are you reading right now?
Book?
Yes.
Actually, oh, it's right here. Why Am I Always So Tired? It's by this nurse with a PhD who talks about copper imbalance and how that might be the stone that's left unturned for people that have like chronic fatigue, and that there's and possibly actually contributing to anemia, and can be. So
what is your favorite restaurant around Orlando?
Oh, we have a great new restaurant we go to called Aurora. It's Aurora. It's on the campus of UCF at a new hotel called Celestial, I think. Celestial.
Oh, nice. Well,
and they do a great job with the gluten-free menu. In fact, the chef will come out and talk to you. Chef Mike comes out and talks to us at the table, and it's just a great restaurant. Aurora.
Very nice. Perfect. So who is a under the radar small business CEO or business owner around Orlando that you love what they're doing that you want to highlight? Or if you don't have anyone for that, what are some restaurants that provide gluten-free options that you know of around Orlando?
Yeah, I don't get out much.
Plus with COVID, because by the time we're shooting this, it's just COVID. So
I don't get out much for small business issues because my elderly father lives with us, and so I am at home a lot. And like you're saying, like COVID happened last year, so I don't have an answer to that. Other restaurants for gluten-free, Cooper's Hawk is amazing.
A lot of people
Cooper's
love
Hawk?
that place. Yeah.
Yes, love that place. There's one out here. We moved way out the 528, so out in the Avalon Park area. There's one at Waterford Lakes. And they have the best gluten-free bread that they will bring, and not everybody has gluten-free bread. Those two are my favorites that I go to.
Nice, good.
The only Asian restaurant I will eat at is P.F. Chang's, because they have a super not only do they have a great gluten-free menu, but they have good procedures in place to prevent contamination in the kitchen.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's good. I think they're same company owns Outback, I believe, and they also have gluten-free options too with procedures and stuff. So what's something new and different that you're doing to stay healthy?
I started a new program in the fall before Stephanie got married called the Faster Way to Fat Loss. And it's really focusing on intermittent fasting, carb cycling, and working out with it's all digital. So it's a digital platform where we do workouts,
Very nice.
30-minute workouts. And that's been my new workout routine. So it's more than just diet. It's more of a fitness wellness program.
What kind of fasting ratio are you running right now?
16:8.
Okay. I was going to ask that question off air, but since you brought it up, I was really curious with like the healing of the microvilli and stuff like that. Does
Yes.
fasting have any properties of restoring that surface area?
Yes, absolutely. And fasting has some great research behind it for not only GI system, but for brain health. So I don't know if you've heard of Dale Bredesen. Bredesen. He's done some great research about doing longer fasting, like more like 72 hours or something. But
he has got some great stuff too. And Sinclair, I think, David Sinclair, yeah, he teaches about like the mitochondria and regrowing telomere lengthening and all that kind of stuff too. So
from fasting
right now, actually, that's how big of a believer I am.
Yeah. Yeah. So we actually implemented it into our lifestyle in the fall. And yeah, along with the other things that go along with the Faster Way, it comes with a meal plan and, for simplicity to help people. So a meal plan and recipes and so forth. And then being at home most of the time, it was great. We had joined the Y, but with all that got shut down. So being at home has just really turned into a habit that we're doing workouts 5 days a week, mainly 2 HIIT workouts and the other strength training with some weights and stuff. So, but both Steve and I like cut 5 inches off our waist.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's impressive during COVID, right? Everyone else is putting on weight right now. So
yeah. So, well, I put on some weight, so I needed to take it off before the wedding. So, so it was really very beneficial. So I did add that to my services and have found some really great results with it. So, and especially for women who go through that menopause belly weight gain, which is totally metabolic because fat produces estrogen. And so when your estrogen levels go down as a woman at that time of life, you actually put on that fat because of that. But there comes a point where you got to get rid of it. So this has really helped.
Perfect. Well, we're going to finish up here. Thank you so much, Renee, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Kind of promoting gluten
Thanks
sensitivity and like celiac disease and stuff like that. And taking time out of your day for joining us and ultimately making Orlando a better place. We'll finish up with this and we'll post it online and we'll be in touch then. But thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you.
Perfect.
Nice meeting you, Trey.
We'll see everyone later.